You're listening to the Everything Jewish 10 Minutes at a Time podcast, where you'll learn about every Jewish topic imaginable in about 10 minutes. And as always, I apologize for all of my Hebrew pronunciation. I know I'm going to pronounce Hebrew words wrong, so instead of getting annoyed, I give you permission to laugh at how I say things. Today's topic is Zionism. For Jews, Zionism is not a passing political slogan. It's the continuation of an ancient longing for return to the land of Israel. It's the belief that the Jewish people, like every other people, deserve to live freely in their historic homeland. When Jews say Zionism, they're talking about centuries of prayers, songs, and traditions that never let go of the idea of Zion. It's not about ruling over anyone or claiming superiority. It's about belonging, survival, and homecoming. And while the organized political movement took shape in the late 1800s, the heartbeat of Zionism goes back far earlier, woven into Jewish ritual and memory across 2 millennia. Every Jewish holiday, every wedding, every Seder table carried the same refrain, "Next year in Jerusalem." Zionism builds on that rhythm, turning it from poetry into reality. Medieval rabbis in Spain and Poland, mystics in Safed, and poets in Yemen all kept alive the dream of returning to the land of Israel. When modern leaders like Theodor Herzl came along, they didn't invent the idea. They gave structure to something already alive in Jewish life. Zionism wasn't born in Europe in the 19th century. It was reborn there. What changed was the urgency. Facing waves of anti-Semitism, pogroms, and ultimately the Holocaust, Jews turned prayers into passports. The return wasn't carried out for the benefit of an empire or colony. It was Jews themselves, often stateless and vulnerable, who pooled resources, bought land, and built communities. The essence of Zionism was never conquest. It was return. It was saying, we've been exiled long enough and it's time to come home. That homecoming took many shapes. Some Jews saw Zionism as a spiritual mission, a step toward redemption. Others approached it as a cultural renaissance, reviving Hebrew and creating new literature, music, and art. Still others focused on building farms and villages, backbreaking labor that drained swamps and planted vineyards. For them, Zionism meant creating a self-sustaining society where Jews could finally live with dignity. Different voices disagreed, sometimes loudly, over what the future Jewish homeland should look like. But whether religious or secular, socialist or nationalist, the underlying idea was the same. Jews deserve a safe, free home in their land. And that land was not a blank slate. It was a place Jews had never fully left, with communities in Jerusalem, Tiberias, Hebron, and Safed continuing through centuries of exile. When new arrivals came, they weren't strangers parachuting in. They were returning to a place that had always been central to Jewish identity, no matter where else they lived in the world. Zionism also isn't about superiority or exclusion. It's about equality, the belief that Jews deserve the same right to self-determination that every other nation claims. After centuries of being minorities everywhere, often persecuted and expelled, Jews sought what others already had, sovereignty in their homeland. That's why Zionism is often described as a movement of vulnerability, not power. It emerged out of ghettos, pogroms, and concentration camps. The message wasn't, we're better. The message was, we deserve to live. And from the beginning, Zionist thinkers emphasized that those who lived alongside Jews in the land, Muslims, Christians, Druze, would have civil and political rights. Israel's Declaration of Independence enshrined that principle, pledging equality for all citizens. Of course, history since 1948 has been complicated, full of wars, displacement, and painful struggles. But the core of Zionism has always been inclusion. The goal was to come home, not to erase others. It was to make sure Jews had a safe place in the world without denying others theirs. Another key point is that Zionism doesn't dictate maps. At its heart, Zionism says Jews belong in their homeland. The specifics, where borders should fall, how peace should be made, are political questions, not theological ones. That's why Jewish leaders across history have negotiated, compromised, and debated borders depending on the circumstances. Some envisioned a small, safe strip of land. Others imagined a broader territory. But the essence never changed: a secure home for the Jewish people. This flexibility is why Zionism could adapt through different eras, under Ottoman rule, British rule, and eventually independence. It was never about rigid lines on a piece of paper. It was about the principle of belonging. For Jews, Zionism meant that after being told for centuries to go back where you came from, they finally could. And when they did, it wasn't as colonizers or invaders, but as a people returning to the land that had always been central to their history, memory, and prayers. When waves of Jewish immigrants arrived in the late 19th and early 20th centuries, they didn't come as soldiers of an empire. They came as refugees, workers, and dreamers. They bought land, often in neglected areas, and built farms, kibbutzim, and towns. They revived Hebrew from a language of prayer into a living, spoken tongue. Zionism was never about exploiting someone else's land for wealth. It was about rebuilding a life after centuries of statelessness. And that's why it resonated so deeply across Jewish communities. For Jews in Eastern Europe, it was a shield against pogroms. For Jews in the Middle East and North Africa, it was an escape when governments forced them out after Israel's creation. For American Jews, it became a source of pride and identity. In every case, Zionism meant the same thing: security, dignity, and continuity. It didn't claim Jews were better than anyone else. It claimed Jews had the same right as anyone else to live freely as a people in their land. World events only reinforced that message. The Holocaust showed the catastrophic consequences of Jewish powerlessness. Zionism provided a path forward, never again dependent on the goodwill of others, never again without refuge. When Israel declared independence in 1948, Jews worldwide felt a seismic shift. After 2,000 years, a Jewish state was back on the map. That didn't mean every Jew agreed on every decision, far from it. Zionism was never a monolith. Some argued for a religious foundation, others for a secular democracy. Some believed in socialism, others in free markets. Some favored compromise with neighbors, others pushed for security first. But all of this debate was possible because the foundation existed. That foundation was Zionism's central claim: Jews deserve a homeland. From the Jewish perspective, everything else, the policies, the politics, the debates, is negotiable. The principle is not. And that principle is what turned Zionism from an idea whispered in prayers to a reality written into history. Zionism has always been about peoplehood, not supremacy. It's about turning Jewish identity into something lived, not just imagined. That's why it speaks to Jews of such different backgrounds. For religious Jews, it fulfills biblical promises. For secular Jews, it offers cultural renewal. For Holocaust survivors, it provided refuge. For Mizrahi Jews fleeing persecution, it meant safety. And for Jews in the diaspora, it became a source of pride and connection, even when they never planned to move there themselves. At its core, Zionism says Jews should not be perpetual guests everywhere else. They should be hosts somewhere too. That idea doesn't exclude others. It creates a space where Jewish culture, language, and traditions can thrive, while others living there share in that society. From a Jewish perspective, Zionism isn't about dominating neighbors. It's about ending the endless cycle of wandering and dependence. It's about finally answering the question, where do Jews belong, with the simplest answer possible: here, in our homeland. Of course, Zionism remains debated, inside and outside the Jewish world. Within Jewish communities, you'll hear every opinion imaginable about Israel's politics, leaders, and future. What unites most of them, though, is the conviction that Jews have the right to self-determination in their land. That principle doesn't require fixed borders, doesn't require excluding others, and doesn't rely on claims of superiority. It simply says the Jewish people, like every people, should be free to govern themselves in their homeland. That's why Zionism feels so personal to so many Jews. It's not abstract. It's family history, cultural survival, and lived reality. It's what turned 2,000 years of longing into a country where Hebrew is spoken on street corners and Jewish holidays set the national calendar. So what's the takeaway? Zionism is not a slogan, but a story, the story of return. It's the belief that Jews, after centuries of exile, persecution, and vulnerability, belong in their ancestral homeland. It's about survival, security, equality, and renewal. It doesn't prescribe borders, erase neighbors, or elevate Jews above others. It affirms that Jews deserve what every other nation claims: the right to live freely in their land. Zionism has been many things to many people: religious, cultural, political, practical. But its core has always been the same: a people coming home. Today, Israel is far from perfect, but its very existence is a testament to that idea. For Jews worldwide, Zionism is less about politics and more about peoplehood. It's proof that whispered prayers of next year in Jerusalem could become reality. And whether you agree, disagree, or wrestle with its complexities, understanding Zionism through Jewish eyes means seeing it not as a myth or ideology, but as a deeply human longing that finally found expression.